Joining me on the podcast today is a well-known public figure, nutritionist, medical doctor, best-selling author and podcast host Hazel Wallace, known to some as the Food Medic. Hazel has dedicated her life's work to improving the lives of so many globally. With so much confusion around nutrition and conflicting views, I'm fascinated to hear how Hazel believes we can improve our mental and physical well-being. She practices what she preaches, and that's what sets her apart. Her new passion for running has given her greater understanding of the sport and one I believe will benefit so many. How can we optimize our performance? Today we find that out.
We are live. Do you know what? This is a really unique feeling for me doing a podcast with you. Normally I come into them feeling really relaxed, but I think your accolades and your intelligence are so superior to me. Like, where do you even start an episode like this? Where do you begin?
I was just saying how relaxed I felt coming in here, but not for that reason. I'm definitely I've collected degrees over the years. I've always been very nerdy, very into school, very into university, and probably a lot of it's come from type A personality and me trying to prove as well that that's what I'm good at and that's who I am.
You are an incredibly driven person. I think that's, to anybody that knows you or I think comes across you, that's probably one of the major factors. There never seems to be enough. There's always something to strive for, but also the ambitions that you have are so broad.
I've always wanted to work in a profession that helps people, and that's why I became a doctor. It's why I do nutrition. It's why I started a social media account to help people when it comes to their health and fitness. And I don't really know where it comes from. I guess losing my dad at a young age definitely shifted my mindset that our lives are very vulnerable and fleeting, and how we live our lives, the food that we eat, the stress that we're under, the exercise that we do, also lends itself to how long we live in the future. And so when I was studying medicine, I was learning all about pills and surgery, and that's all incredibly important. But what I really wanted to know was, how is nutrition going to improve our health, and how does exercise improve our health? And I guess that's put me into the position where I'm at today, where I'm not your usual doctor. I'm not your usual nutritionist. I'm a bit of a hybrid health professional, I guess.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
When you think about the broad spectrum of things that you have achieved, and I would say some of the titles that you would come under, which one of them all would you say gives you the most pride?
If I was completely honest, it would be doctor. I think walking across the platform when I got my degree in medicine and got handed the certificate and they said, call out your name, Dr. Hazel Wallace, for this first time, that just was like no other moment of my life. And I think the reason it was so special for me was when I decided that I wanted to study medicine, it was a bit late in the game. I was 16, 17, I hadn't done all the right, it would be your A-levels, but we call it leaving certs. I hadn't really chosen the right ones. I was spreading myself really thin. So I was an older graduate student going into medicine. And I think working so hard to get it made it even sweeter when I got it. So it's something I'm really proud of, and it's something I struggle with now because I've left the NHS and I work primarily as a nutritionist. And part of me feels like I don't really know who I identify as anymore, because for many years I was like that doctor in scrubs that you see with the mask on during COVID, and that was me. It's not me anymore. And that was a really valuable part of my life. But what I'm doing now feels like the right thing for me to be doing right now. And it's not to say I won't go back or I might evolve again. And I think being open to evolving as a person, be that professionally or personally, is really important.
It must be such a conflicting profession because so many people go into that space with the purest of hearts to help as many as possible. But you can quite clearly see to the detriment of their own mental and physical health. When you look at the sheer strain that you guys are under, I mean, it's so unbelievably challenging. And yet there does feel almost like, I don't know whether the judgment is internal within your peers or whether you feel it from others, but by leaving something like the NHS to support the masses and potentially go private, it's a bit of a taboo subject almost. But actually, can you really blame anyone for wanting to make an easier or a better life for themselves? Now, I don't know if that necessarily means there's better hours for you to work under, but I think certainly for you in your profession, it became more flexible, which probably holds the most value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I thought about it for years, like when will be the moment that I go full time with the food medic doing my own thing. And it took me years to decide because the NHS also gave me security and I had friendships there and I trained there, and I also didn't want to like leave it behind. And also there was fear of judgment, like if I leave, will people still respect me? Which is a very like honest thing for me to say, but I think we look at jobs like doctors, dentists with like this prestige, and like for someone to take another job, like why would they give that up? But for me, like it's always been much bigger than that. Like it's never just been about working in a hospital and seeing a handful of patients every day. The opportunity I have with social media is so much bigger than that, which is exciting.
I think in your books as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, experiences are knowledge. And I mean, I don't know if you did feel judged by making that decision, but I think, I've said this before, I think you should question somebody for what they do with what they have rather than what they have. And actually, I think if you look at the time that you spent supporting so many people, you're going to learn so much from that. So no matter what your practice might be or your focus lies, you are going to take so many values from that and integrate it within those new projects.
Yeah.
Did you feel judged when you made that decision? Or do you think that was an internal thing, thinking that was the case? Or was it a visible expression from others?
No, it was definitely a perceived fear, which I guess is anxiety in itself. When I announced it, it was just like this echoes of, celebration and support. And that was coming from colleagues, other doctors and non-medics as well. So I was just like, I know I shouldn't wait for that validation, but it made me feel a lot better about it. Sometimes I still get questions, are you going back? Do you miss it? And I'm very happy to answer those questions. And I do miss that part of my life, but I've just started my own one-to-one practice, and that's given me that like ability to see people one-to-one, because I love helping people on podcasts or doing courses, but you can't really replace the one-to-one support that you can give a patient or a client when you're working with them individually and see them go from feeling really terrible to feeling really, really good again.
Did you envision how your career has materialized in this space? Because I mean, what you've done over the past number of years is just phenomenal. Like, it's not a case of I say you've just, but it hasn't just purely been the medical practice. It's the endorsement deals off the brands that you've worked with. It's writing these books. I mean, the growth of your social media and the interactions that you have on that is just phenomenal. And I think that could go on and inspire so many people to believe that they equally have that ability too.
Yeah. No, I had no idea. I mean, I call it a happy accident because social media, I started it 12 years ago in my uni kitchen, and it was like almost as if I was trying to inspire myself to be healthier. I had just joined the gym. I had just started learning about nutrition. And I was starting from square one. I was like, had just gone through my first couple of years of university, had been following a very Welsh diet, which is a lot of cider and very much exercise. And I wasn't in a very healthy place. And so social media or my Instagram account started as a way for me to inspire myself. And I think the fact I was a medical student drew a lot of attention because I was sharing what I knew from a research background, scientific background, which was very novel compared to the influencers that were big at the time. And in my final year of medicine, I was given a 2-book deal, and it was Christmas time. I remember getting the email. And like the money was life-changing because I was also an international student, so I was deep in debt. So to know that I was writing 2 books and also going to be coming out of debt and going to be qualifying as a doctor that year was like, I can't even describe it.
Imagine that. Imagine graduating from university with 2 book deals.
Yeah, it was.
That is actually ridiculous. How old did you have been at that time? Don't say 21.
25.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
That is
No,
ridiculous.
25.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good year. It was a good year. And I guess that just like, then it just snowballed. But I worked, full-time as a doctor for the years after that. So, and the food medic was like my side hustle. So I didn't really have much of a life. And I think now that I'm in my 30s and I'm not working 2 full-time jobs, I'm actually trying to reclaim a lot of that. Like I'm reclaiming a lot of personal goals, like running and traveling and just doing more things that like we should be doing outside of work and exercise.
Do you think you've got that balance now? I mean, by making those decisive decisions, you have to be selfish. And if you continue to keep giving to so many other people, you keep sacrificing yourself.
Yeah.
And actually, in order for you to give your best to whatever the project or person might be, you need to be in your entirety.
Yeah.
But how can you do that if the candle is literally burnt at both ends? And I think that's the problem is society now is so used to that feeling that it's become the norm.
Yeah.
And actually what so many perceived as being selfish, I think now people are starting to realize is a necessity. It is so important to nurture and love yourself.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you want to have longevity in life with anything that you do, it's really valuable. That's something that, I'll be honest, I've really struggled with, I think, for so many years. And it's only probably the last couple of years that I've started to realize that the way that I was feeling was not okay. And I needed to improve that. And actually a lot of it, the thing that made me probably feel the best about it was that it was self-inflicted, that it could be rectified.
Yeah.
And actually I'm so much happier for it. I made some really decisive decisions just before Christmas, last year. And it's completely changed the direction of how this year can go. And I'm so much happier for making those decisions. I mean, my situation is naturally going to be very different from somebody else's, that I might have more flexibility in my life in order to make those decisions. For someone, that might not necessarily be an opportunity, but I guess you've got to tailor it for yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
What would you say has been the biggest blessing or learning for yourself over the past couple of years? Like if you look at where you're at right now, and you look at how happy you are and the environment that you've kind of put yourself in, was there like a defining moment that you think has managed to kind of like direct you there?
I don't think there was a defining moment. There was like a period of where I went through a really a rock bottom and came back up. And it was towards the end of the pandemic. I'd been working as a COVID doctor for 2 years, and I was working in outpatient clinics at this point. So not even like the hardest work I was doing, but it was seeing people who were coming out of ICU and going through recovery post-COVID, and also telephone clinics with people at home. And I was doing like one every 10 minutes. And I just burnt out. I was so burnt out. I thought I was really unwell. And like, I'm a doctor, I should know the difference. But I thought I was really unwell, like something physically was wrong with me, because I was having like palpitations, hair loss, just really unwell. And I had a therapist at the time, and he said, "You're burnt out, you need to take time off work." So I told my consultant I need to take time off. They gave me time off, and I actually never went back. I took 2 weeks off in bed and then decided to hand in my notice. And I think during that time I realized I'm not Superwoman. I can't do everything. And more is not more. Like, I really enjoyed that time, but I also was running a full-time business. I was writing my 3rd book, and it was just all on top of me. I wasn't seeing friends. I didn't have a relationship. I wasn't seeing my family. Like I wasn't looking after me. And I was thinking, I don't want to wake up when I'm 60 and think, oh, I've got all this amazing like career goals that I've achieved, but I'm not who I want to be. Like, I'm not happy.
God, that's quite powerful. Why do you think that is, though? I mean, why do you think we wait until potentially we hit rock bottom? Do you think it's because we're blinded by the signs pre to that? Or do you think that's just the reality of where we are at right now, where, like I said, we are able just to kind of function in that kind of like lower level?
Work is hugely demanding now for everyone. Our lifestyles are hugely demanding. But I think, and I obviously can't speak for everyone, but I was definitely suffering from that I'll be happy when syndrome, where I was just thinking, just get to the end of this job contract, just get to the end of writing this book. Like, everything was like, it's going to get better if you just push through, when I was like on my hands and knees just getting through. And I think when you are chasing a goal, like, that's amazing. It's amazing to have goals. But also you have to have the emotional capacity to do that. And you have to enjoy the journey of doing it. Like, it's no good doing a marathon just because you want to tick it off. Like, you have to enjoy the process and learn from the process. And not every run should feel like the worst thing of your life. And so that's what I think now. Like, work now is really challenging. And some days I feel completely exhausted by the end of it, and I have breakdowns and meltdowns, but I also am really learning a lot and I'm enjoying it. And I want to get up in the mornings and go to work, and I'm not like praying for the weekends. And that to me is a sign that I'm getting it right. No, I don't have it perfect, but I'm getting it right.
Yeah, life is so short. And again, I know for some, we're not all completely blessed with the dream job, but what's to say that you can't have that? I mean, for me, I look forward to Monday morning, but also I think maybe the life choices that I've now made have been tailored for that to happen. I don't get to the weekend and absolutely tear it up like I once did. Maybe that's just a progressive thing. I'm not saying that anyone much younger than myself should avoid from, partying, several nights a week, because I think maybe that's just the rite of passage, right, to adulthood to some. But at the same time, it is almost like this negative cycle where, again, it's almost like we don't feel great. So we put ourselves into an environment that equally is not going to make us feel much better, but it numbs us from how we originally felt.
Yeah.
We just keep going through that same motion time and time again. I think that's why, for me, running came at the right time, where I could burn off that negative energy or that stress, or I could express myself in quite a physical and a unique way.
Yeah.
And actually the community of people that I kind of came into contact with, and the conversations I was having, I was just learning so much from these individuals, whether they were the youngest or the oldest.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. And I think that's why, for me, an individual like yourself coming into this sport is so exciting, because I think your pedigree, your background, what you can do for the sport, not just in terms of like the psychological, but the physical element as well. I think with your nutritional background, there's so many sort of like gray areas still to this day. When you actually look at a lot of runners, there's so many factors that I think we neglect or just uneducated on, like sleep, recovery, nutrition, the physical element. And actually, like, when you look at your background from the physical side of things, you were massively into CrossFit at one point, weren't you? I haven't seen much content around that lately. Have you kind of deviated away from that into the running?
Yeah. Well, I still strength train like 3 times a week, but I don't do CrossFit. I used to do it like pre-COVID, and I did a 5 a.m. class on my way to work, and that was just routine. Like, and I loved it, and I met loads of friends. But what I realized was it was actually causing my body a lot of stress, and not positive stress.
But at the time, did it make sense? Was it more
at
just
the time it made
was it the
sense.
community,
It was
or
it was the community.
the sense of accomplishment with what you were loving the cleans? Was it the cleans you were doing, and the jerks back then?
And I think, oh gosh, I can't even believe I could do that. If I try to lift those weights now, I couldn't. But that was a time in my life where that was what I wanted to do. And I'm the type of person that I will give something my best shot. So I really enjoyed that. And I think then COVID happened. We all were exercising from home or running. And like everyone, I did that. Like, remember there was like show your first 5K. It was like 5K for some charity and we all did it. And that was my first ever 5K. And then during that time, my next door neighbour was Emma Kirk-Odenubi, who is a running coach. And I said to her, like, I want to start running, but I'm really terrible at it. And she was like, you're so fit. Like, of course you can run. I was like, no, I can't. So we started with 1 minute on, 1 minute walking, 1 minute on, 1 minute walking. That was like 2021, I think. And then 2022 ran my first half marathon, but without any training and really muddled through. And then last year, 2023, ran my first full marathon, actually with you.
Yes, you did.
Your final marathon.
Yes, you did. That was special.
That was special. And then I did a second full marathon in New York where I tried a bit harder.
That was so special. And like I've said this to you before, that meant so much, you being there and for you to do that first marathon. And just, there were so many individuals there. There were people that came off the back of nights out without sleep who I think only intended to just give me a hug. And I actually ended up running like a half marathon or their first 5K or 10K. But I think that was just testament to that experience where we took away the competitive element and we didn't prioritize the time in that instance. It was just a case of like, just people and unity and the power of music. I mean, when Josh came with the speaker on his back and hit that playlist, like that feeling when we were all running together towards Buckingham Palace at the finish is something that I don't think I'll ever be able to replicate again in my life. It was just the most powerful moment, and to just hear the adrenaline coming out of so many different individuals, but equally the pace that we ended up running to try and match Josh on the bike was rapid. I think like the last couple miles were probably the quickest of the marathon, which was mental.
This week's episode is sponsored by Runner. Runner is a personalized running coaching app helping runners of all abilities train for any goal. From a first 5K to a marathon, even an ultra marathon. When the time is right for you, your plan can be created within a minute and ready to go. With each plan, Runner provides all the help a runner requires, including strength and conditioning, and you can also reach out to the team at any time via the support tab inside the app. For a 2-week free trial on any personalized running plan, use the code PHOENIX. No matter your goal, Runner is there to help you achieve it.
Be really interesting to see if you would end up going into maybe the ultra side of things, because I think you've got the headspace for it. It's just a case of when and what the why would be behind it. Yeah,
I do. I was chatting to a friend about it yesterday, and that's my next goal. I think like a 50K ultra first to see how I get on. I definitely want to do it, but I also, like what you said is really important. It's what's the why. I don't want to just keep chasing down distance, because like that's a means to an end, isn't it? Like you can run as far as you can run.
Yeah. I think the distance, like for me, the distance, obviously you've set yourself a goal. The best advice I could give you and to anyone that's listening has that ambition is try and find things that will make that distance special.
Yeah.
Like what's the meaning behind that location? The weather conditions, you know, could you do it internationally where the novelty and the excitement of like a completely unique environment, you know, brings that element?
Yeah.
Just changing it up a little bit rather than just, you know, we're London based, like running down the Thames for
that's
50K.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
No, that's it. And I think when there is meaning to it, it just makes it so much more special. And I think I was one of those people who showed up to your last marathon thinking, I'll do at least 10K and we'll see what happens. And then I was there at the end. I was hobbling. I think I was the last person that came over that line, but I got over the line. And I was really happy that I did it. But I think also doing New York Marathon, that feeling that I got afterwards was amazing. And it wasn't just crossing the line. It was like the fact that I trained so hard for the weeks beforehand, everything that I'd sacrificed to get there and show up for myself and get a sub 4-hour marathon, which was what my goal was. And I think that's really important, is to like not forget that whole journey that you've been through, because a lot of my friends finish a race and within that day they're booking their next race. They're not like relishing in the moment that they've like just rest for a minute, like rest and take in what you've done and think about the why of the next one. So that's that's why I've not booked anything yet. I'm like just thinking about it. I would love to even expand into doing triathlons because that terrifies me and I want to keep challenging myself. I'm in my 30s now. And I said when I was just turning 30, that this will be my fittest decade yet. So I'm trying to prove to myself that you can keep building on that and getting fitter because when I was 22, 23, I wasn't in the gym. I wasn't running. I wasn't eating healthy. I was probably physically older than what I am now.
Yeah, do you know what? Triathlon is fascinating. So Alex Yee came on and he was saying that to be perfect at 3 disciplines is almost impossible.
Yeah.
And for him, that's the goal that he chases. And when he put it like that, it's so true. I mean, to have the discipline to be able to focus on not just the running, but the cycling and the swimming too, that takes up an awful lot of your time. But I think you have to be a certain type of person, be in a certain type of environment in order for you to be able to do something like that, because it is a huge commitment. And I think that's one of the greatest assets you have, and equally he does too, is David, your fiance, because you both have such similar passions and you champion one another. And I think that's really valuable. You know, we've spoken about this in the past where, you know, certain individuals may not necessarily be in an environment or a relationship that has that effect. And that can be really challenging because actually when you are tested with something like that, the reinforcement that you need, you can be the strongest person in the world, like Reese behind the camera and my team. I will turn to these guys sometimes every other day. Like I might come across as one of the hardest men there is with the challenges that I've done, but I'm an incredibly emotional person and I've turned to them more times than I count for reassurance, for that emotional support, because you are naturally going to burn out at points and you are going to question whether what you are doing is right. Because have you noticed being in that relationship with David that is the case? Because equally, if you look at the ambitions that he has, you know, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's hugely beneficial if the person that you're with or your friendship group are into the same things that you are, especially when it comes to things like activity and training and things like that. And when we first got together, we were definitely doing different things in terms of our training styles. And I actually trained for my first half marathon last year with Runna, doing the Landmarks half. And David just came with me because I was bored and lonely and didn't want to do the long runs by myself. So he just came along for the ride. And then he watched me do that and he watched me cross the line and he was like, I'm so inspired by you. I'm going to sign up to Hackney Half in May. His commitment to training is like nothing I've ever seen. Like right now, he's basically doing a hybrid training approach with swimming, cycling and running. And he's trying to get his sub 3 hour marathon. He's never run a marathon before. He's done an ultra, but like not a marathon for time. And like he's doing double session days, but he comes in, he doesn't complain. His energy doesn't change. He's still happy to cook dinner when I'm working. And it's like, that is hugely inspiring for me because he's got a business to run as well. And he's still able to get up and get it done. If that means getting up early or training late, he's still doing it. But I think if you've got a partner who is going through something like that, they're training for a marathon or an ultra or a triathlon, it's the little things that matters. If they're like, oh, I put the laundry on, or I'm cooking dinner, or what do you want for dinner, or I picked up this, make their life a little bit easier through those little things. Like he doesn't want me to be like, oh, poor you, or giving him lots of cuddles. Like he does want affection, but he doesn't want me to pity him or say like, oh, why don't you take a rest day? Or why don't we just have a night off and you have a few beers? Like he's in that mindset and I need to just support him on that. And I think that's the most valuable thing that I can do right now.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? When I had poisoning recently, India knew that I wasn't particularly well, so she made me cardboard in water. So, I mean, I really relate to you on that one.
Just make my life easier.
The worst thing about it was she actually made me eat it.
Oh my God.
I had to spoon a mouthful and she wouldn't let me get away with it unless I swallowed it. So, I mean, as a doctor, you probably know, can we digest cardboard?
I feel like that's probably why your symptoms have been so prolonged.
Honestly, maybe that's where it came from. Oh, bless her though. She's got a heart of gold. For me, nutrition's one thing, but then when you connect nutrition with the performance element, there are going to be so many people listening to this episode and yourself that are going to be so interested in what is like the optimal whether it be a marathon or 5K or triathlon, whatever it is, what's like the optimal meal that you could have maybe pre that. When it comes to something like during the physical element, you know, what is it that you would have? I mean, obviously, again, that very much is going to be tailored towards what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, it is really confusing. The thing with like sports nutrition, sometimes it feels like it's very conflicting to like general healthy eating advice, because it's like, get carbs in, get loads of sugar, try to not have too much fiber, reduce your protein, reduce your fat around runs. And when I talk about that, people get very confused because they're like, oh, hold up. You said I should be having more fiber and more protein, and actually I should reduce my amount of sugars that I'm having in my diet. So it can be confusing, but you need to look at food as fuel when it comes to your running. Like, there's a science to it. There's a reason why we're choosing these nutrients. And carbs are king when it comes to fueling your running because it's the main energy source that we use. We'll use some fats, but primarily carbs. And so thinking about that pre-run, you want to have a carb-based meal. And what we want to reduce in that meal is our fiber intake, our fat intake, and our protein. The reason for that is they slow down digestion, which is fine in a given day, but when you want to run, you don't want that happening because it's going to mean that you'll get cramps, you're not going to get the energy you need, and it can lead to things like runner's trots or runner's gut. So that's something to bear in mind.
Runner's trots, I've never heard of that.
I know.
I'm going to use that from now on.
Yeah. So that's one way to get around it. What does that like practically look like? Things like bagels are a great source of carbohydrates. Like, so you want to go white bagels before your training, maybe have it with butter, some jam, you can have some peanut butter, not loads of it, some banana. Some people like oats. I actually find it quite heavy to run on oats, but again, it's so individual. You need to figure out what feels good for you. So oatmeal, whole grain toast and eggs is another source. So thinking about like putting your carbs first, not too much protein, not too much fat, not too much fiber. Then during your run, if you're not running for anywhere longer than 90 minutes, generally you don't need to bring anything with you. So 60 to 90 minutes, anything more than that, bring fuel with you. And what I always say, like when I'm working with clients, is don't wait until you're empty to start fueling. So you want to start fueling about 45 minutes in, and then every 30 to 45 minutes after that. And the rule of thumb is 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. What does that look like? Well, you get about 30 grams of carbs in most gels. Some of them have less. A banana, a handful of like jelly babies, a couple of dates, that kind of thing. So figure that out. It's not a perfect science. You're never going to get like 60 grams on the hour. I never do either. So you'll end up kind of just roughly estimating. Then when you finish, ideally you should be having something once you finish, but most people actually don't feel that hungry after they finished running. I don't know how you feel.
Can you explain to individuals why that would be?
Basically, because when you run, all of the blood is diverted away from your gut to your working muscles. So you just don't have hunger yet. It also suppresses your hunger hormones because your adrenaline's just like sky high. When that wears off, a couple of hours after, people often feel like really hungry. Or what most people say to me is actually the day after a long run, I'm really hungry. And that's often because we haven't fueled enough on the run day. So if you're someone who just doesn't feel hungry straight after, a really good snack is actually chocolate milk because it's got the right amount of protein and carbohydrate to help you refuel and repair. And it's also quite delicious and it's hydrating as well. So it's a great like in between. And then later on, refuel with, again, carbohydrates, but now you can add in your protein, your fats and your veggies. So I always say like repair with protein, re-nourish with the veggies, refuel with your carbohydrates, and then rehydrate with your fluids or electrolytes.
Would there be any foods in particular that you would say to people to stay clear of? Because I mean, I've heard people saying that, you know, immediately after, say, you know, you're doing a run, hypothetically a marathon, things like fast foods are probably not the best. But at the same time, when you look at rugby players, more often than not in the changing room post-game, you'll see them eating like a Domino's pizza. Do you think, based on what you've just burnt off, you're better off eating something than nothing at all?
Yeah, I would say that. I would agree with that statement. I think thinking about, again, like fat reducing digestion, it might make you feel a bit more nauseous if you're having a Domino's pizza versus having like a whole food meal. And it may slow down the time it takes for those nutrients to get into your muscles and your bloodstream. But if you've just run a marathon, like the most important thing is you're getting the energy in. So while I would prefer as a nutritionist that that's coming from whole food sources, I get that you're probably really knackered and you just want something like really satisfying and salty right now. So yeah, I would just say like get in the calories. But the other thing that I see, which runners often do when it comes to pre-running, is they prioritize protein to the detriment of carbs. And I see this a lot on TikTok where people do like what I eat a day before a run. And it will be like a protein bar before they run. And I'm thinking there's no carbs in that. And that protein and all that fiber is actually going to cause probably some gut issues along the way. So while protein's really important and it can be tricky to get it in around your runs, just make sure you're not having it before your runs or during your runs because it's kind of useless during that time.
Because I mean, it is key, isn't it, to have a good consistency of protein with carb.
Yeah.
Having protein solely on its own.
Well, you can have it, but not like it doesn't fuel your runs. It's not really going to do anything pre-run. After your runs, when you're not really concerned about getting enough energy on board, you're just trying to think about repairing, get your carbs in and your protein then.
I've had conversations, by the way, with people in this space who are pretty influential and they're relatively new to it, but people are invested in their journeys and they're asking me what my thoughts are on fasting during running. And we're talking considerable distances.
Yeah, that concerns me. That concerns me a lot. I think there's a lot to unravel there. Like taking the aesthetics versus performance thing first, I see that a lot with women who come to me. They're very conflicted because they're signed up to a half marathon, but they're also in this extreme calorie deficit because they want to drop X amount of kgs before a wedding or a holiday. Those two things don't go hand in hand. And actually, they blunt their weight loss journey by putting themselves in such a calorie deficit, then doing such extreme exercise that they're just so stressed that their body just plateaus and it just down-regulates. They lose their cycle, their metabolism slow down, they feel terrible. And so oftentimes what I talk to them about is actually increasing their calories and thinking about themselves as like athletes, which some people like, they laugh at when I say that, but I'm like, you're training for a marathon, you're an athlete. Like, see yourself as an athlete who needs to get enough sleep, who needs to stay hydrated, who needs to fuel appropriately, who's not trying to cut weight right now, and taking all of that into consideration. And I think, you know, it's far more complicated than we can unravel in this one podcast. But once you see someone go from that aesthetic mindset to the performance mindset, it's just such a beautiful thing to witness because their whole mindset towards their body changes as well. They don't see it as something that they need to make smaller or change or that it's the problem. They see it as it's the vessel that's getting me to achieve my goal. And they start really respecting their body for what it does. And I think that's really powerful.
I think that's the same with men.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of men in this space, including myself, who maybe have come from that sort of background. And, you know, for me, how I physically am in the gym, the sort of the weight that I'm lifting, it's for me that signifies strength. And so when I start to maybe decline in that side of things, it does mess with my head. And I'm going to be really honest to anyone that's listening to this, because I don't want to put myself on a pedestal where I'm the finished article. I'm one of those individuals where there probably is an element of body dysmorphia where I'm really conflicted with maybe the size that I'm at, but that's come from maybe such a fluctuation of weight where I found myself physically at a point that I'm very content with. And then I throw myself into something physically so demanding and, all of that seems to diminish. But what I need to try get my head wrapped around is not to focus on the fact that my size is reduced, but the performance that I've just achieved.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that you should be so proud of. And I need to start emphasizing that more.
I think what you said is really powerful and it's really important. And it's also okay to know that you go through seasons in life where you've got different goals and you've got different focuses and different priorities. And you may not be as strong during your marathon training block, but next season, you may not be running the distances and you may be actually stronger than you were before because you've given yourself a bit of a rest. And so you're never going to be able to balance everything unless you are someone who doesn't have a job and you're training all the time and you've got like a nutritionist along your side and you've got a personal chef. It's almost impossible to achieve high performance in all modalities of sport and exercise.
I guess also, but on the flip side of things, when you actually have the balance, if you get the distance right, the calorie deficit right, and the strength training right, the synergy between the two is incredible.
To maintain muscle while you're running, you need to be doing resistance training and you need to be getting enough stimulus in that. So you need to be challenging your muscles in order for them to grow or maintain. But in addition to that, you also need to be eating enough calories and enough protein, which can feel conflicting for a runner because carbs are what fuels their run. And this is something I'm trying to achieve right now because I've gone through the New York Marathon training block and went from 3 strength sessions to 2 to 1 by the end of, I wasn't really training. And I was just eating carbs because I was just running long distances and I lost so much muscle mass. And I was, like you, slightly conflicted by that because I worked so hard for that. But then I also thought, well, Hazel, you can't really have everything you've worked. Look at what you've just achieved. And so now I'm being my own experiment. Like, I know I actually have to eat a bit more. I have to eat more protein. I need to be more structured with my training around my runs without impacting my run performance. So it's like, it is a tricky balance to get. But I think a lot of people, and I'm speaking mostly for women, underestimate how many calories they need, especially when they're training for big events, big running events. And I think from what I see in clinic, a lot of them underfuel because they don't think that they deserve to have that energy on board. They don't think they should be eating that amount of calories. Running or exercise is not, you shouldn't view it as, oh, because I've done that, then I've earned my pizza or I've earned food. I think like seeing it as transactional is like a pretty damaging view of food. And it's about looking at things in like its entirety. If you want to be an athlete and you want to perform well, you and I both know that having a Domino's every time you do a long run is probably not going to be the most nutritionally beneficial thing for you. If you do it once in a while, it's not going to make a difference. It's like, it's what we do most of the time that matters the most.
100%. I mean, you're never going to have everybody agree with you.
No.
We've had literally the world's greatest athletes on earth on this podcast speaking openly about their journeys and their personal development. And we still will get people commenting, trying to correct them on what they should be saying.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of like, I remember there was a guy commenting, I think it was on Alex Yee of all people, just telling him essentially how he should think and approach things. And I was saying, Alex, are you paying attention to the advice that you've been given on how to become a world champion when you are a world champion? So it's not a case of you've put Alex Yee on a pedestal where he knows more than that individual. Yeah. But I just think we're just so quick to question someone's view on things. And I think what's really nice about this space, and I'm hoping with the community that we are building, having somebody like yourself coming on, we're not here to influence and guide people down the views of Hazel Wallace. It's more just, this is an approach that you have taken. And, the reason why I said this is so valuable is because, you do what you preach. These are things that you have inherited for yourself and are working. And actually, it's maybe another option for somebody to trial for themselves. There was a really powerful moment with you that really inspired the idea for me to get you on with this podcast because you are so expressive as an individual. And I think when people look at your work rate, your ambition and your drive, it's the fact that when something's not right, rather than you putting on a facade, you are so open and honest with the people that are invested in your journey, with what it is that you're going through. And there was a really poignant moment for me where you were meant to be coming to LA to run the marathon. And for some time you had an injury, which unfortunately has got to the point where it's now ruled you out of being able to do LA. And you were open and honest about that on socials. And I really hope the reaction you got from the general public was more, I don't know, was a surprise to you in the sense of how supportive I saw it really was. And I don't think we see enough individuals out there that when they're going through something like that, feel that they have the strength or the ability to share it. And I think we need to start seeing more people doing that, because unfortunately, I think we're going down a path right now where it's just grind, grind, grind. Don't sleep. Don't waste your time eating. Don't make friendships. If you get injured, you work through those injuries.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how that's sustainable.
I mean, it wasn't an easy decision to make, but as we were talking about this entire podcast, the goal is not to run LA Marathon or any marathon. The goal is to run for a very long time for the rest of our lives. And so I know that I could probably muddle through the marathon where I'm at now. It would be painful, but I could do it. It wouldn't be the best time, but I could show up. And I would have weeks of recovery after that. I may not be able to run for a couple of months after that. And it's not really something that I'm willing to sacrifice. And initially when I say I'm not going to do it, I'm like, oh, I'm a bit of a failure because I've been training for this and now I can't do it. And the response was just, overwhelming, where people are just sharing their experiences and that they've been, that they've actually been the person who's pushed through the marathon and had a terrible time and haven't been able to run for 6 to 12 months and have said, I wish I had this mindset then. So yeah, it's not been an easy decision to make, but I'm also on a much better kind of path now that I've made it, because I've just been made my decision, got the treatment I need, and now I'm back running. And I'm not running marathon distance, but I'm running, and I'm just I was so happy when I got to run 3K. I was like, this is amazing. 3 months ago, I was running 30K, and it's humbling to only be able to run 3K, but it just proved to me that it's not about the race. It's about being able to run, for me anyway.
I think it's so important that you focus on the broader picture, because I think if you solely just focus on the actual distance itself, there are so many learnings to come pre that, like the sleep, the nutrition element, the training, the environment that you're in. Curveballs are inevitable. And actually, I think how you face those are the most important thing, because for me, I'm equally going through one right now. I thought it was food poisoning. I now believe it was actually salmonella. I've had to go get tested, my blood, my stool samples, to get a better understanding of what it is I'm going through. For the past 4 months, I've trained so unbelievably hard for LA, and I physically was probably in the best place I'd ever been to run a fast time. And it's kind of all been undone in a sense, because I don't think that time now is probably as achievable as it once was. But my mindset, and this just comes off the back of years of being in this now, in this space, is not to be deterred away from it. I am so proud of the commitment that I made to my training and the people I connected with, and that I got to that point. I know I'm able to achieve that. Now, if I've done it once, I know I can do it again. For me, I'm still going to go to LA. I'm still going to run the marathon, and I'm just going to embrace the experience. That might not necessarily be my race, but as you've touched on, there are so many more races to come to look forward to. I've absolutely loved having you on today. I've learned personally so much myself that I can now adopt going into things. To end the episode, is there anything you'd like to say to the listener that you think they could benefit from?
I would say, to summarize our podcast, more is not more when it comes to everything. So when it comes to running, when it comes to nutrition, work, everything, like more is not more. And I learned the lesson the hard way. So just try to find some balance.
What a way to end it. Hazel, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing episode. And the pressure was on. I hope this was one that you thoroughly enjoyed.
I did.
I'll take it. You star. Big love.
Good.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, you fatty biscuit, all I ask of you in return is that you push that subscribe button and leave a review. Unless it's a bad one, you can keep that, you sausage. Your support, though, makes such a difference to this podcast and enables it to grow and connect with even more people around the world.